I'm Jeremy Aiken, founder of Perfectus Jiu-Jitsu. This is the White Belt Survival Guide. The main goals of this course are to help you set expectations early on, give you an idea of what the first few months are going to be, and help you with the positional hierarchy of Jiu-Jitsu. Alright guys, so let's look at tying the belt. So you're going to find the middle section of the belt. You're going to fold it in half. Put your gi together. Put the middle spot right where your belt buckle would be. You're going to go around the back, crossing, back to the front. And kind of layer all three pieces here. You're going to go underneath, over the top like that. The longer piece that's going over the top is going to go around through here and then tighten it. So let's talk a little bit about mat etiquette, some safety things, and then also just about basic hygiene. All right, at the beginning of the class, all the students will line up. The instructor will be at the head of the class, most senior ranking student all the way down to the newest. Then the class will start with a bow, and then the instruction portion starts right there. Biggest things is don't talk while the instructor's teaching, and then don't leave the mat during instruction. Wait till there's drilling time for that, and you can head off the mat if you need to. Safety things, if you're training with someone smaller than you, be aware of your body size. Go lighter, obviously, if you're training with someone smaller. And if you're training with someone larger, it's totally your prerogative to ask them to slow down or be a little more respectful of your body size differences there. Let's talk about hygiene for a second. You're going to be in close proximity with other people, so please be respectful of that. Clean your uniform, bathe, and trim your fingernails and toenails so you don't scratch anyone. One of the most common questions I get early on is how often should you train? If your goals are to be competitive and you're trying to get as good as you can, as quickly as you can, obviously the answer would be train as much as you can. But I don't want you to sacrifice other things in your life. Obviously you've got friends, families, other hobbies. So early on, try to fit jiu-jitsu in the best you can. Whether that's 2 days a week, 3 days a week, that's fine. If you're trying to be competitive, then you're going to need to train at least 4 days a week to be relatively competitive, in addition to just taking good care of yourself. Alright guys, so we're going to talk about some of the basic positions in Jiu-Jitsu. The first thing we're going to talk about is the guard position. Okay, it's probably the biggest thing that separates Jiu-Jitsu from wrestling and judo and all these other grappling arts. So, let's see here. Get Brandon in the back. Connor on top. So anytime Brandon's using his legs to control the top player, this is the guard position. So right now this is closed guard because obviously his legs are closed. There's open guards as well where he can get whatever grips he wants. He can put his knees, his feet on him, anything he wants defensively, making Connor's job harder to get around the legs and pin him. Okay. From the guard, we've got a lot of different things, so I'll show a couple things real quick. Connor, can I borrow you? So from the guard, you have submissions, arm locks, there's chokes, triangles. There's a lot of ways to win from the bottom. There's also sweeps where you go from bottom to top. Okay. But the main goal of the guard, so like if Connor's playing guard here, is to keep me at bay with his legs here. Okay. Anytime I get around Connor's legs here, around the hip line, this is what we talk about like dominant position. So this would be like side control. We'll get into those positions and kind of the goals. But the first thing I want to talk about is just kind of like the defensive aspects of the guard. Anytime I get around his legs, he's got to square back up, getting his legs back in play. Okay, so I'll show a couple examples of this. For example, if he comes around using my feet, framing, coming back, he goes under my legs here, recovering my hip line here. You can use different kinds of grips in the gi. There's different variations here, using leg entanglements and all sorts of things. But the main goal of the guard is to protect you on bottom. A couple other variations of the guard is half guard. So half guard is going to be any time that you have one of his legs trapped here. All right, obviously this is half of a full guard. Okay, and anytime, just for defining purposes, anytime your feet are not locked, this is open guard. When it's locked, it's closed guard. And when you have only one leg trapped, this is a variation of half guard. So now let's talk about what the top player's objectives are. We talked about the bottom player, right? He's trying to defend himself, prevent me from getting around, and securing pins and top submissions. My job is obviously to get around his legs. There's 3 basic ways of doing that. I can go around the outside of his legs, which we call like outside passing. There's ways I can go through, like inside passing, where I'm actually kind of coming between his knee line like that. And then there's underneath passing, which is any time you're kind of stacking, turning the corner like that. So just to kind of recap here, outside passing is around the legs. Inside passing is through the legs. And underneath passing is underneath the legs. And there's tons of variations of all those. And whether you're training gi, no gi, if you're training for MMA, the goal is to get the legs out of the picture and get around the belt line, securing dominant positions. So we talk about when we're passing guard, the 3 phases. There's 3 types, but there's also 3 phases. Beating the grips and hooks here. So he's kind of got me stuck. So understanding how to pummel, clearing the offensive hooks, securing the passing positions, and then finally ending with the actual securing the pass or the pin. So as far as the guard position goes, Olivia, do you have any questions or anything?
If you're in his close guard, how do you get out of his close guard to then pass?
So one of the toughest parts early on is close guard because you can't really move. This is probably where white belts make the most mistakes early on. You know, whether they're trying to get a choke or something like that, they get arm locked or choked or something. So the main goal of this is you want separation between your chest and their chest. You don't want to be down here, right? You'll make grips, and we're not getting too much into it in this course, but basically standing up, pushing the knee, and then opening the guard. But at a high level, you're going to need to stand up no matter what you do to open the guard. All right, guys, so let's look at side control. So, Connor, can I borrow you? So we talked about the guard position. We talked about passing the guard. And now let's look at some pins. Okay, so this is, anytime we're talking about side control, we're talking about this kind of perpendicular nature where our spines are lined up like this. So names for this, we call it side control. Some people say crossbody. Some people say like a side pin. But for us, you know, we're just using the term side control. There's head and arm where you've got a cross face, an underhook here, you're creating a ton of pressure. You know, you're in the armpit. There's this position, like a chest to chest. There's also variations where you'll be kind of hip to hip. Okay, this is really good for like when you're on top of someone bigger than you, you can kind of stabilize this. And then there's gonna be arm position differences. Instead of having like a crossbody arm position, we're gonna have a near side arm position. And we're gonna have usually the shoulder here. And this you're going to use to eliminate his escapes where he's trying to get back to guard. Okay, so we've got chest to chest, kind of a hip ride, and then we've got this kind of blocking the hip positions inside arm. Okay, my goals in side control are mainly to advance position. So I'm trying to get to mount, to the back, to knee on belly, maybe even north-south, and we'll talk about those here in a second. His goal here is pretty simple, it's to escape. His main ways to escape are frame-based. So he's got to create structure underneath me so that I can't put all of my weight. He's going to bring his inside knee close to me where I can't advance position. If Connor was here, relaxed, and there was no frames, it's easy for me to go right across the mount, which is the best position. When he brings this knee up on the inside, and he has good frames, every time I try to go, his leg gets back in front and he's able to get back to guard. And now he can start attacking me, right? So here, offensively, I'm trying to break his frames away. I'm trying to get in between his ribs and his armpits, right here. He's trying to keep those. He's trying to get on his side. I'm trying to pin him. And these are kind of the mini battles that this whole position is going to be kind of hinged on. The submissions from side control are going to be fairly low percentage at a high level, but there are submissions here. They're mainly like far arm submissions, like you've got Americanas here, like shoulder locks. We got some crush locks here, got kimuras, but it's really hard to get that on if somebody's got good solid frames, okay? The most common way side control gets bad is usually when people go to knee on belly, they bring their knee across, or instead of stopping in knee on belly, they go all the way across to the mount position. Now this is a great position, we'll talk about it in a second, okay? His basic escape arm positions, he has to have his inside frame, and this arm's gotta be either in a frame or an underhook, okay? But this arm's non-negotiable. If I get inside the armpit here, it's gonna be really hard for Connor to get his shoulders off the floor. So he's recovering his inside, he's either framing or underhooking, and he's turning towards me and either going to some type of single leg here or framing back to guard. All right, so we talked about the guard position, we talked about passing the guard, we talked about securing side control, even escaping side control. Now let's look at the next positions. So we talked about side control transitions, right? A lot of them are going to be my knee going across his belly to some degree, whether I'm stopping in knee on belly or whether I'm going all the way to mount. So let's just look at the knee on belly position. This is probably the least used position in competition jiu-jitsu, but it's a great self-defense position. The bad thing about side control is Connor can hug me, right? And if I'm in a self-defense situation where there's multiple people, I can't leave. I'm like stuck. He can just hold me while his friends or whatever. Knee on belly, it's much different, right? If we were in some sort of fight, this is a position where I can keep myself safe. I can also leave the position or leave the fight here. There are submissions in competition jiu-jitsu, but at a high level, people are really flexible and this leg can pummel over. So it's really hard to hold that position, but we'll look at it anyway. Typically your transition to knee on belly, you're gonna thumb grip the collar. Your far arm is gonna come across blocking his hip line. You can make a grip here, whatever you're comfortable with, but the elbow has got to be controlling his near side hip. From here, we like slide our knee right here across his sternum, almost like on the line of his gi. We pull everything really tight. We've still got both grips, and then we get our base leg up in this position. If you're on your knee, you're not going to be stable. If he bridges towards me, it's going to knock me off balance. So I want to be in this kind of split squats position where I've got pressure here, and now there's chokes, there's arm locks, there's a lot of transitions from here, or I could just pull and make him really uncomfortable. As far as escaping knee on belly goes, this is one of the harder positions to escape. Most of what Connor does here, there's really not a lot of connection. If he turns towards me, I can just flatten him back out. If he tries to turn away, he exposes his top arm and the back. So most of your escapes back from knee on belly are actually going to put you back in side control. So you're actually like framing across, so I can't get the underhook, hip escaping away, and almost making me settle back into side control so that he can build frames back and escape that position. So the next position we're going to look at is north-south. This isn't, in a tournament, this isn't going to score like the other positions, but it's a great pin, okay? So we're going to be, we pass the guard and we're in some type of pin here. There's a lot of variations depending on where his arm is. Typically, we're looking at going from side control, blocking the hip so he can't recover his guard, circling around. I bring my knee right here towards his neck to trap his head. My other foot's going to be out here for base. My inside arm's going to be blocking his inside leg, and my head is blocking his hip. From here, this arm could be around here or underhooking. Typically, you're going to find yourself right here, and all of my weight is going down here. It's going to be one of the hardest positions to get out of, but one of the least likely positions you're going to get submitted. So my advice underneath north-south is just kind of keep your elbows tight and wait for them to go to a better position. It's easier to escape. All right, so now we're to kind of the most dominant positions in jiu-jitsu, which is the mount position. Mount is going to be any variation of this, where my hands are free to post, to strike, to attack submissions. Most of the weight is going to be in my lower body. There's variations of mount. This would be considered like kind of a generic mount where it's like, you know, I could strike from here, I can do this, but it's not a lot of pressure on him. There's a low mount where you're like driving your hips down and you're kind of grapevine his legs or locking your feet and making him carry all of your weight. And then there's high mount where you get all the way up here. And this is going to be where you're going to find most of your submissions because his elbows are open, right? Anytime your partner has closed elbows, there's very unlikely you're going to submit them. When you can open the elbows up, this is where you're going to find most of your joint locks, back takes, and chokes. Okay? Now, mount, if Connor was to turn on his side here, and I come up to this position, some people call this technical mount, side mount. This is not S mount. I call it technical mount. The idea here is my knee is behind his back, my foot is kind of back heeling into his hip here, and I'm facing the same direction he is. The reason this position is so important is if my foot gets trapped when he rolls, if he just barrel rolls, it'll literally just pull my hips underneath, and then I'll end up on bottom. Because of that, it's really important that I get this leg out of the way if he's turning this way. As he goes to turn, by opening this, I don't get pulled underneath him. From here, there's a lot of things you can do with the upper body. There's gift wraps where you can control him here. There's Kimura traps where you can go into submissions. Most of the time, I'll just use my chest on his back so he can't turn back. This rotation going from mount to back mount is like super important, especially for like self-defense jiu-jitsu. If he's here taking shots, he's going to turn to get away from the punches here, and then he's eventually going to try to get up, right? So he builds up here, he goes out the back, I might lose position, right? So with mount, he starts to turn, you come to this technical mount position here. The next transition is important. So my foot becomes the first hook. And when we talk about hooks, we just mean kind of like back heeling into the legs so we can connect. So as he starts to rotate here, my knee comes to the floor and my foot becomes the first hook. Now from here I'm posting, this hand comes underneath either to his wrist, to his gi in competition, and then I make this second hook, okay? And we end up in this position where both of my feet are in front of him. My weight is on his hips here. From here, we can pull the arms underneath, flattening him out and controlling him. This is going to be probably the least likely position you'll be in competition. It's actually hard to submit him, but in self-defense jiu-jitsu, this is kind of your goal here. It's very hard for him to do anything offensive. Usually in sport jiu-jitsu, we end up seat belting and ending up in the back position, which we'll talk about next. So anytime we talk about mount, we need to include this rotation to the back. So he starts to turn, we open the knee, he goes to his knees, I follow, making a seat belt or an over-under, and then ending up here with easy access to his neck and our feet holding his hips. Let's talk about the defense. Obviously turning, getting up his back is not the defense. What he wants to do is he wants to bring one arm like an L. That stops me from advancing up into high mount, which we talked about being the most offensive. And it also allows him to turn and control my hips at the same time. Because of this frame here, it's hard for me to stay with him, okay? Now the escapes will typically be back to guard. And we'll talk about that another time. Or if he's able to trap my foot here, he can bridge, pulling me to the bottom. So the battle in mount is going to be a battle for elbows. If I can cross his elbows up, keeping him here, he can't make defensive frames. If he's able to make defensive frames here, it's going to be hard for me to advance. So now let's look at the back position, which is typically where when you go to mount, you're going to end up in this position. So with the back, we've got our feet controlling his hips, our knees are controlling his ribs, and we're kind of locking him, stopping him from rotating. I want an underhook, and then the overhook is going to be your choking hand. So this is going to be your main offense. So like if we're here, feet controlling the position, underhook is helping with rotation, and then we've got our hand here ready to choke, whether it's a gi choke or rear naked. And then the underhooking hand is going to be hand fighting. So if he gets hand control, that's the hand that's going to be peeling so that you can get to the neck here. Some variations of the back. It's going to be, this is kind of the standard back position. We also have body triangle, which is going to be where your bottom hook is across the belt line. Your top hook is going to lock here, and then you're going to hook, you're going to at least try to hook the top of his leg here. This can be made with either side seatbelt. This is kind of one of the most difficult positions to escape, but obviously not everyone's able to do the body triangle based on leg length and body size. All right, so the last basic position is going to be the turtle position. So Connor's here. This can happen, it can be on the side here. There's variations where you'll be kind of behind the hips. And it'll be where you're in front of the body here, okay? Typically when you're in front, you're going to be kind of using wrestling techniques to get around the back. There's some jiu-jitsu moves like chokes and stuff like that, but typically when we're here, we're looking to get around here so that we can start attacking the neck and taking the back. Some of the back takes are going to be seatbelt back takes where you're like flaring here, pulling the guy's hips down, getting to the actual back position. Or transitions where maybe you've passed his guard here and he's going to the turtle position where you're like taking the back here, getting hooks in transitions like that. So when you think of the turtle, we think of a position, but we also think of transitions while we're passing. So let's go back to the guard. So it could be like off of a throw by, where you're like hook sliding. It could be stacking, or he's going to the turtle here. You're coming here. Your defensive obligations in the turtle is mainly choke defense. So whichever side I'm on, so say I'm on this side, his far hand is the one defending his neck, right? If he tried to use the same side hand, I'd be able to punch through and get across his neck. So the far hand is your defensive hand. Most of your escapes are going to be back to guard. So he could roll over the near side shoulder, recovering guard, or he could collapse to his far hip, kind of pulling back into the guard position here. Some of the other answers, Brandon, in the turtle position would be getting back to his feet here, right? So he's controlling, clearing his hip, and standing back up. One more time. Standing back up. Okay. All right, guys, so we're going to look at the 3 most common submissions. This is going to be mixed martial arts, gi jiu-jitsu, no gi jiu-jitsu, your day in and day out training sessions, open mats. And these are the 3 most common submissions. So the first one we're going to look at is an arm lock or an arm bar. This can be done from a lot of different positions. We're just going to look at it from the closed guard first. Okay, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring his elbows in. If his elbows are outside my body, I can't move my hips. So however I do that, whether it's with gi grips, no gi grips, whether I'm just pushing here, whether I'm 2-on-1ing, same thing. From here, I want to climb my legs and make an angle, right? So if I just climb my legs, they'll just keep sliding down his back. And if I just make an angle, I can't get his elbow. So I've got to make an angle while I'm climbing his hips. And we lock like this position here, which is kind of like a pit stop between closed guard and the arm lock. From here, I'm going to be attacking this arm, the one same side of the shoulder I'm controlling, okay? Now from here, I'll transition from this top lock to my leg being over his head, clamping down on his neck. The reason I'm clamping down is to stop him from ripping out of this, okay? So here, as I'm back heeling really heavy into his head, it's very difficult to go up. And then this leg, I'm leg pressing him so he doesn't stack me. If I relax, he's able to push my knees to my nose, and now he can rip his arm out again. So those are things I'm worried about, right? So get the elbow out of my way, climbing my legs over his shoulder. From here, I'm pinching my knees, back heeling. Now from here, I want to control the wrist. You can do it. I'll get this out of the way you can see. I can reach across to my hip. I could hold the thumb. There's a lot of it. Some people hold the shoulder. But at some point, Connor's going to want to bend his arm so I don't straighten it too much, right? So I want to be hugging that. From here, the leg that's on his back is back heeling and keeping him from stacking me so that this leg can cut the corner. Most common mistake people make is they want to lock their legs, which is not necessarily the end of the world. The problem with locking your legs is your knees open. As your knees open, it's easier for him to stack me, right? I'm not in a strong position. So I want to think about the end of an arm lock being like a leg press. My knees are in line right here. I'm back heeling. And if Connor drives into me, it's very easy for me to press him away. Okay, obviously I'm not holding the wrist. I don't want to hurt him. But climbing, get the angle, clamping, and now I'm going to get thumb control. So I'm going to try to grab the muscle of his thumb so that he can't rotate his wrist. Okay, that's going to change the angle of his elbow. I'm going to line that up. My knees are going to be really tight, heels back heeling, and then lifting to hyperextend the elbow. Okay, the idea is my hips will be going this way while I'm pulling his wrist this way. Last one. So we looked at the arm lock from the guard. Let's go ahead and look at the triangle choke from the guard. So same thing, we're starting in closed guard. With the arm lock, we needed an angle. And sometimes that's the hardest thing to get, right? Every time I try to make an angle, he squares back up with me, making it really difficult to get that angle for the arm lock. Also, see how his elbows are outside my hip line? It's almost impossible to arm lock him here. But anytime his elbow is away from his body, it's easier to bend his arms, right? So here, I'm gonna control the posture. I'm gonna basically push this wrist to his chest. When I do that, I'm gonna jump right over, okay? Now from here, controlling the head, foot on the hip, making a good angle, locking the triangle. Now we could get into a ton of details on all these submissions, but I just kind of wanna give you like a three-step. Three-step, get one arm out of the guard. Okay, that could be you doing it. It could be you're holding grips and he reaches in your legs, which some guys will do that, which is a mistake. You jump here. This could also come from open guard where you're getting to this position. We call this like the triangle guard, right? So we're not to a triangle lock yet, but we have his arm and his head. The choke itself is basically gonna be me taking this shoulder, compressing it into his neck, while my hamstring is cutting into the other side of his neck. The lock itself is just keeping him from opening his elbow. Because if he opens that, he frees this artery. Here, my knees are really tight. And at the end, I want to make sure this ankle gets all the way to my hamstring and I don't settle for like a shallow lock, okay? From here, I can hold the head. I can hook the shin. I can underhook and rotate. But eventually what it's going to be is my knees closing, my feet coming to my butt, and then squeezing. Sorry. Here. So we're here in closed guard. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so if you had to break this down, 1, isolation. 2, posture control. 3, knees together to squeeze. All right, guys, so we've looked at a couple submissions from the bottom. Now let's look at probably the most important submission in Jiu-Jitsu, which is the rear naked choke, or the mata-leão. Mata-leão's Portuguese for lion killer. The whole idea being this, you could do this to anybody no matter how strong they are. So we talked about the seatbelt, right? We talked about defensive hands, clearing this, right? Now let's look at the actual choke here. So yes, there we go. It's easier if I can just kind of lean back here so you guys can kind of see slow. What I want to do is as this arm is coming around, I want to get my thumb behind his neck. If I settle for a shallow grip, he'll find my thumb and peel my hand off. So I want to hide my thumb here. So when he's trying to reach for it, it's very difficult to get my thumb. Okay, so I'm here. I'll punch this through. And now I want to put my chin right on my thumb line so that every time he reaches up, he's not going to be able to separate that. My underhook comes out, and then I bring my hand behind his head, trying to grab, the best of my ability, I'm trying to grab my shoulder here, like this. You sometimes will settle for your bicep, but you never want to be low here. Also, probably the biggest mistake people make is they bring their arm like this to grab their bicep, but he ends up trapping your arm, and then you're stuck here. So when you make this transition here, you want to hide this behind his head, getting through. Now this hand here is going right at kind of the small of his neck, not grabbing the head. It's not like a sleeper hold. You want to go behind here so that he can't pry his way out of it. And the last little bit, other than the obvious, which is to squeeze, is to bring your choking elbow around his shoulder. That rotation is going to get through his hands, right? So if Connor's got good defensive hands here and he's really fresh still, it's tough to get the tap, even if I squeeze. But when my elbow starts pulling back, it's easy to get the choke. So now it's, last thing is to look at the hand fight. He's got defensive hands. I take my underhook, peeling, getting behind the neck, sealing that space. Coming through, getting it tight, rotating, and squeezing. So those are the 3 most common submissions in pretty much every form of jiu-jitsu. The whole goal of this course is to kind of get you started, right? This isn't like a complete guide to jiu-jitsu by any means, but hopefully it gives you kind of answers some of the frequently asked questions you'll have. It also gives you a kind of understanding of offense and defense in some of these positions. If you're looking to get started training jiu-jitsu, find an academy in your area. If you happen to live in the Middle Tennessee area, want to come check us out, Perfectus Jiu-Jitsu at perfectushq.com.